Hey friends, it's your pal Mike Shea from Sly Flourish here with a bonus episode of the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I did not have a game this week, which meant I had extra time in my schedule, and I thought it would be fun to do a year in review. Let's take a look at the tabletop role-playing game hobby over the past year, notable things that happened, notable products that came up, kind of thinking about them now that we've got sort of time between us and the time and what it means, and then a look at 2025 and what are the things that are kind of exciting me in 2025. I am very curious about the stuff that excites you in 2025, but you're not here with me, so I can't hear directly. So we're going to do like a year back and a year forward. We're going to kind of get out of the here and now and think a little bit deeper about what's been going on in tabletop role-playing games and what is going to be coming out in the future. So that is today's episode, today's bonus episode of the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm your pal, Mike Shea from Sly Flourish, author of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. And this show is brought to you by the patrons of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to all kinds of cool tips, tricks, tools. An example of the kind of tools you get as a patron of Sly Flourish is the Dyson commercially licensed map gallery. Dyson is a fantastic resource for awesome maps. I downloaded all of the Dyson's royalty-free maps that he allows for commercial use and stuck them into a gallery. So you have a very easy tool. You can kind of make a slider bar to see it. Go and find a map that helps support whatever game you're running. I use this tool myself every week when I am building out dungeons or I'm building out ideas for my game. And it is available to, and it's downloadable. You can download this gallery, which includes all of the maps. So you know you will always have these maps available. It's about 600 maps that are available in this gallery. Tons of maps covering all different kinds of situations, all available for you as a patron of Sly Flourish. You can view it online. You can also download, and I recommend downloading a copy because we can never trust anything to stay online. So download your own copy so you have your own copy of 600 Dyson maps and a gallery to let you. The gallery runs locally. It can work in your browser locally. Really, really handy tool. That's available to patrons of Sly Flourish. To the patrons of Sly Flourish who helped me put on this show, thank you so much for your support. It's been a fun year. I love tabletop role-playing games. And I've had an awesome year running tabletop RPGs, making products for tabletop role-playing games, doing this show, writing on my blog, lots of stuff. Last week, I had my 100th RPG session that I ran for my friends. That was really awesome. I got to tell them, I was like, this is our 100th RPG session and probably the 100th, the last session that I will be running this year. But I feel very grateful and very lucky to be in a position where on top of everything else that I'm doing, I was able to run 100 sessions. That was really, really fun. I learned a lot. I had a wonderful time with my friends, and I'm very, very lucky to be able to do that. So that was really good. But we're going to take a look at some of the other big stuff that happened and then kind of try to take a wider view of it, try to think about it a little bit more and sort of what was the value of that, what happened with that and what do we think might come. So I think we would be completely remiss to not say that the biggest thing to come out in the tabletop role-playing game space for a lot of people is the release of the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. These books were released late this year. We are still waiting for the third book in this 3-book series, but we'll get to that when we talk about 2025. No, I can't get them back on my shelf. And what does it mean? And I think my assessment, I think this is accurate. I could be lying and you guys can call me out on it if you know that I had a totally different opinion. My opinion was that it was very likely to be kind of in the middle, that I didn't expect it to be this amazing, total new take on this game that we've loved over the past 10 years, nor did I expect it to completely tank the hobby. I thought no, it's going to come out, it's going to fix some stuff, it's going to add some stuff, it's going to complicate some stuff. My hope was that it was a net benefit. Is it a net benefit? I think we still have to see. It's not bad. I like it. I've run it. I now have players that are playing D&D 2024 characters. I've run D&D 2024 characters. There are things that I thought might annoy me that are annoying me. There are also parts of it that I like, that I think are really smooth. I just did a whole part of the previous talk show where I dove into all of the different various aspects of the D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide that I think were notable things that we could use at our table. So the answer on what's the true impact of this, I think these answers still we're going to have to see. I don't think it's been long enough. It's only been a couple of months. And when you think about it took 4 or 5 years to really understand the impact of D&D 2014. So we're going to have to see how this plays out over the next year and maybe even years beyond. We'll have a better idea of what it means. But it was certainly notable that it came out, and we're seeing a lot of new information that's coming out about it. We also got Tales of the Valiant this year. So Tales of the Valiant is Kobold Press's take on 5e, their home version of 5e. That way that kind of takes them out of being a third-party producer of 5e material into a first-party producer of 5e material. Tales of the Valiant is really good, and I like it a lot. I think that, I don't know that I could rank it side by side with D&D 2024 yet and say that I like one over the other. There are aspects of Tales of the Valiant that I really adore and I think definitely do a better job than D&D 2024 does. There are also aspects of D&D 2024 that I think do a better job than Tales of the Valiant. So I think we have sort of a, both of them are good in different ways. I am running a Tales of the Valiant game now for my Sunday game, and I like it a lot. My players like it a lot. I think it's really good. One thing I really like is I love the pocket editions. I kind of wish Wizards would make pocket editions. The pocket editions of the Tales of the Valiant books are really nice. They're easy to carry around. They're easy to reference. They're just, they're easy to use at the table. I really like those. Tales of the Valiant also has all 3 books out now. We don't yet have the 2025 Monster Manual for D&D. But we do have all 3 core books for Tales of the Valiant, including the Adventurer's Guide, the Monster Vault, and the Game Master's Guide. I did a big, deep look at the Game Master's Guide before. I don't think I've spent that much time talking about the Adventurer's Guide or the Monster Vault yet, but I like both of those as well. The Monster Vault has some really excellent monster designs in it. They hit really hard. So it'll be interesting to compare the Tales of the Valiant Monster Vault to the 2024 Monster Manual. But I really like the Monster Vault. I've been using it for my Tales of the Valiant game, and I like it a lot. So it's been great to see Tales of the Valiant out. And now we really have a true, we did before with Level Up Advanced 5e and even some others. But we have another copy of 5e that's completely independent from anything going on with Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast. So if you're upset with AI, if you're upset with anything else that they're doing, you don't like the direction that's going, but you still love this kind of version of D&D, Tales of the Valiant is a really good way to go, and I like it a lot. They also released the Black Flag System Reference Document. The Black Flag System Reference Document is a single big PDF, 385-page PDF that covers a ton of the material available in Tales of the Valiant, including monsters, including magic items, including class information, all licensed under the ORC license. The ORC license was spearheaded by Paizo as part of the OGL catastrophe from back in 2022. 23? Was that early 23? Is that when that happened? I think it was early 2023. And as part of that, they put out the entire listing of their material under this license, and it is available for it. I really wish that this was available under a Creative Commons attribution license instead of just the ORC license. It's interesting to see how the ORC license is working out and how Creative Commons licenses are getting more and more popular. We're seeing other game systems that are using them, other tools. Even I was just talking about how Kevin Crawford's Cities Without Number has a CC0 license that they release under, essentially releasing the copyright on the material completely. The reason why I would like to see it under Creative Commons is that a Creative Commons attribution license is not a viral license. It means that if I wanted to use material from Black Flag in other material that I write, I don't have to release all of the rest of mine under the same ORC license that this is released under. What's interesting about it is the argument for it is, well, we don't want to give something away and know that somebody can then lock it back up in another work downstream. But Kobold Press did exactly that. They took the Creative Commons attribution license that Wizards of the Coast released and used Black Flag to release that. They released Tales of the Valiant using the 5.1 SRD released under the Creative Commons license, but then they limited the material that they passed downstream in Black Flag, saying, and they said this on a message forum, we don't want to release everything. We want to keep some of this stuff. But they're not allowing anyone downstream from them to have the same benefit. If they release it under a Creative Commons license, then the person downstream could do exactly what they did and say, there's some of the stuff I want to release in Creative Commons, there's some stuff I don't. If you are downstream of an ORC license, you have to release all of your mechanics have to be released under ORC. Kobold Press didn't have to do that because the 5.1 SRD was not using ORC. If it had used ORC, they would have had to do that. So I think that I really wish that Kobo Press would take the Black Flag SRD and release it under a Creative Commons Attribution license. As it is now, though, it's still very usable. If you're willing to work with the ORC license, you can definitely work with it. And it means that you can still copy this material around. You can send it to your friends. You can build online databases with this stuff, because then you're not mixing different material from different SRDs together. You're only using this, which means you can, of course, if you're only using this and you're releasing an ORC, well, it was already released under ORC, so you're not really losing anything. But it's the merging of information with other stuff that I think limits people's use of this material elsewhere. But it was interesting for them to put it out. I'm very glad that they did. And I do think that Tales of the Valiant is an excellent system. Another big thing that happened this year, which was when we talk about Mike's Little Candles. Mike's Little Candles are sort of indicators on whether or not Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast are being good partners in the tabletop RPG world. Are they making the hobby better? Right? And some candles can flare up that we're dead. Some candles that are burning can go down, stuff like that. One of the candles that I didn't expect to light up, but did, was releasing D&D 2024 on Foundry. One of the candles I expected and hoped would stay lit was releasing D&D 2024 on existing platforms that Wizards had already supported, including Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds. But I didn't necessarily expect them to do Foundry. I had hoped they would do Foundry, and they did do Foundry, which means you can now download the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide for D&D 2024 on Foundry. This matters for a couple of reasons. One is that their Wizards of the Coast support for Foundry and Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds shows that they're not trying to lock up all of their new D&D material, which is really going to be the biggest material that they release for years. They're not locking it up just behind D&D Beyond, which they could have done. I don't think it would have surprised anybody if an executive at Hasbro said, why on earth are we releasing our material on other platforms when we spent $160 million on the platform we wanted to put on? We want people to come to D&D Beyond. We don't want them going to Roll20. We don't want them going to Fantasy Grounds. We don't want them going to Foundry. We want them using our platform. Also, by the way, we're investing a bunch of money in a 3D VTT. We want people using that. Why would we release this anywhere else? Lucky for us, they didn't say that, and instead said, no, we're going to put it out everywhere. We're in lots of different platforms. We're going to put it out under Foundry. We're going to put it out under Roll20. We're going to put it out on Fantasy Grounds. That's a really big deal. The other big deal is that Foundry and Fantasy Grounds let you download that material and hold it forever. It doesn't matter what happens to the company, and Wizards of the Coast can't pull it back. They can't change their mind later and revoke the license. Unlike your license for Roll20 or your license for D&D Beyond, it's not limited to ensuring that the online platform decides to keep it there and that the online platform stays around. Instead, it's about having your local copy. So the Sly Flourish official recommendation for digital copies of D&D 2024 would be get them on Foundry. Foundry is really popular. It's really flexible. It's a non-shittified platform. You download the software, you enter your license key, and you never have to connect back to the Foundry main server again. You can buy the products on there and download them and have your local copy. You can make snapshots of it, so you can snapshot your copy and put it elsewhere. You can host it on hosting providers. You can run it. I'm actually going to be installing Foundry on a Raspberry Pi in my home, maybe today, probably not, probably tomorrow, but over the holidays, I want to learn more about Raspberry Pi, and Foundry is one of the things I want to put on it. I'm going to probably wait till I can get all three books on Foundry, but then I'm going to buy it on D&D 2024, so I have my own local copy. So I think the fact that D&D 2024 is out on Foundry is a really big deal, and the fact that D&D 2024 is available on Foundry, Roll20, and Fantasy Grounds is great. I think it's a good burning bright candle that does show that in that area, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast are being good, beneficial members of the larger community by putting out the most popular role-playing game on multiple platforms beyond just their own. Shadow the Weird Wizard, a highly anticipated role-playing game. I think it was on EN World's list of the most highly anticipated role-playing game, came out in 2024 as well. Shadow the Weird Wizard is a reimagining of Shadow the Demon Lord by Robert Schwab. It is a two-book series, Shadow the Weird Wizard and Secrets of the Weird Wizard. The Kickstarter ran, I think, more than a year ago, and then both products were released in PDF and in physical books. I have them. I've read them. They look really cool. I'm really looking forward to running a Shadow the Weird Wizard campaign. I think Rob is a tremendous writer. He's a tremendous designer. I really love Shadow the Demon Lord. I'm very excited to see where this goes, and I'm very excited for Shadow the Weird Wizard. I'm excited for this game. I think it's going to be really cool. He's putting out tons of supplements for it. I'm getting new adventures every week. So very highly supported. I think that is a fantastic thing and something that I was looking forward to in 2024 that happened. And I'm looking forward in 2025 to actually running it. Another big piece of news was that D&D Beyond started publishing third-party products, including Lord of the Rings, on D&D Beyond. I am still very torn about this, and I have discussions and arguments with people on many different platforms all over the place of whether this is actually a good thing or not. It is certainly a notable thing for 2024. I think it's a big thing that happened. Whether it is good or not, I think is questionable. I'll bring up some specific examples of like, why is it great and why is it not necessarily great? I think my biggest fear with it is the further centralization of tabletop role-playing games around a single tool owned by the biggest company involved in that hobby. The centralization of tabletop role-playing games, I don't think is something we want. I think the fact that it is a highly distributed hobby, i.e. you have your books, I have my books, you can play your games, I can play my games, I have my group of friends, you have your group of friends, and we all play separately, and we can all get online and talk about it, but I'm not dependent upon your group, you're not dependent upon my group, the two of us are not dependent on some other group. That makes it really powerful. We are not really in that state because we do have the books. It's not like, again, if Wizards of the Coast had said, not only are we not going to release D&D 2024 on any other platform than D&D Beyond, we are also not going to release the books. You can only get it on our platform. That's the only way you're going to get it. Again, you could see an executive doing something like that, right? That is not a totally unheard of strategy. Of course, we want you to come here. We want you to pay monthly. We're not going to sell it to you. You're going to pay us, you want the books, $5 a month for the rest of your life. And, and you can't download them, right? And then we get to decide if they change and we get to decide whether or not they stay up or down or whatever. And by the way, you can't use it. So can't use it if you don't have the internet. They could have done that. Now, that would have been a really big shift, and they didn't do that, right? The reality is we have the physical books. I've got them sitting right there. We have physical books. We have multiple platforms. So then what's the real risk? I would say the real risk of centralization of the hobby around D&D Beyond is way smaller than like it was a couple years ago during the OGL catastrophe, or if they had done any of these other things. I think that would have been a much bigger problem. So my concern is not a huge concern. It's a minor concern. And my minor concern about the centralization of the hobby is there. And I'll give some examples. I was talking to Morris over at EN World, and Morris and Jessica on EN World. And they said one of the things they hear about a lot is, wow, we really wish that Level Up Advanced 5e was on D&D Beyond. And Morris is like, we do too. We would love to have it on D&D Beyond. We've reached out to them. We've never made it anywhere. And you can understand why. It's because why would we put a competing version of 5e up on our platform? Right? Like you already said, we have D&D. We don't want them playing A5e. We want them playing D&D. So you can see why they wouldn't want to put it there. But then some players are kind of so used to running things on D&D Beyond that they're like, oh, if it's not on D&D Beyond, I don't want to use it. And if it is on D&D Beyond, I absolutely want to use it. I think the whole Silvery Barbs conversation was this way, that Silvery Barbs felt like a default. It felt like once they published it, everybody should use it all the time. It's a terrible spell. It's just terrible. And it's not official. There is no official in 5e anymore. Everybody is a 5e producer. So there's no official thing. And something being official, or i.e. published by Wizards of the Coast, doesn't make it better. There's lots of circumstances where they put things out that aren't better than other games. So the idea that D&D Beyond creates this environment of, well, that's the official stuff, and everything else is just third-party trash. And if it's not on there, I'm not going to use it. I had a player who said she had advanced players where when they were given custom magic items, did not take them because they weren't on D&D Beyond easily. They would have had to write them in, and they didn't want to go through that kind of trouble. That sort of thing makes me worried about a centralization of stuff on D&D Beyond. And I think adding more third-party products to D&D Beyond doesn't make that situation better. It makes it worse. It means that more people are going to expect to see stuff there or only use the stuff that's there. Now, there's another truth, though, which is it is really good for those publishers. My understanding is that the publishers that publish stuff on D&D Beyond right now get a lot of money from it. That it works out really, really well for them. I don't know what the distribution cut is between Wizards of the Coast and the producer, but the producers I've talked to do not seem concerned about that. And the money is good. It's also products they've already made, which means their cost is pretty low to get it up there. There's effort to get it up there, which is why not everything is up there. And in fact, Wizards of the Coast uses some of their resources to get that material up there. They've got programmers and designers and stuff like that making sure the products get up there and work. So that's why they're only looking at really big products, which is part of the problem as well. Which ones do they choose and which ones do they not choose and why? There's no visibility into that. We have no visibility into what the cut is for producers. We have no visibility into which ones they choose and which ones they don't. We don't there's a lot of things we don't know about what products go up there. Right now, I expect it's when Wizards expects to be able to make good money from it themselves with their licensing fee or their fee for running the platform, then they'll probably pony it up. And an example of that is Lord of the Rings. Getting Lord of the Rings up there was a big deal just so they could have the brand of Lord of the Rings on D&D Beyond. Almost didn't matter what the tool was. They just wanted it to be there. And it being there was important enough for them to be able to do that. So that's not unexpected. But then there's a question of like, well, what if whoever's in charge at Wizards of the Coast just doesn't like a company? Is that enough for them to not ever get a chance to go up there? What if Wizards of the Coast is making an RPG themselves that they want to put up there, but there's another publisher of an RPG that wants to put their thing up there, but that would be a third party. And they're like, well, why would we put a third party one up when we could put up our own and not pay somebody else 70%? Assuming it's 70%. I have no idea what the percentage is. There's lots of different ways that system can be corrupt. That the system for Wizards of the Coast deciding who goes up there and who does not could be a corrupt system. Again, for publishers who publish there, it's very lucrative. So they definitely want to be there. For Wizards of the Coast, it's great because they get brands like Lord of the Rings to go up there. Is it good for customers? I'm not so sure because every one of these new things that goes up there takes development resources away from improving the rest of the tool, maybe. And what we saw is like when Lord of the Rings went up there, it's kind of a mess, right? It's kind of weird. And people were telling me about it. And I went and looked at it. It's like, it doesn't really fit. And the character builder, which is really the only tool up there that's truly vital, the character builder doesn't quite mesh with all this stuff. By the way, they still haven't fixed all the bugs getting 2024 and 2014 up there, much less other third-party resources up there. So there's a desire to get more products up there, but is that diluting their ability to make the tool itself better? Who could say? So that it's possible customers are suffering because of the expansion of business partners. If that sounds familiar, that's stage 2 of enshittification. Stage 2 is you support your business partners more than you're supporting your customers. Is that happening? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say because it's a very opaque system that's going on there. It was definitely a big deal. It's going to be a big deal to continue. There's things we can do as a GM, right? That when I talk about how this matters to GMs, there are things we can do. And the big thing you can do as a GM is when you're buying products from third parties, buy them directly from the customer, buy them directly from that publisher, and buy them in PDF and physical versions. Your physical and PDF versions, you'll be able to hang on to as long as you care for them. They can't take them away from you. They can't change them, and all of that'll work. If you still want to have it on Beyond just for a convenience factor, that's fine. But now you're just licensing something. You're not buying it. And as they change things, you have no idea if they're going to change it for the better or not. So something to watch, something that we'll watch in the future. But I still don't feel like the D&D, that adding more material to D&D Beyond, especially third parties, is a universally good thing. I do not think it is a universally good thing. I think there are trade-offs for this. And I think that it's possible that in the long term, those trade-offs could end up being worse. Shadowdark continues its popularity. Shadowdark was my product of the year for 2023. Yeah, 2023. I loved it. And now I've run a full Shadowdark campaign. Shadowdark continues to be talked about in all kinds of different places. People bring it up as a very, very popular RPG. I'm very excited that it is a popular RPG because I really like it. Kelsey Dion, the creator, is a wonderful person, and it's a really, really good RPG. And I loved my campaign. I ran it again for Ravenloft. I think it's an excellent tool, and I'm not going to spoil on things to look forward to in 2025, but there's Shadowdark things happening in 2025 to look forward to. But I'm very excited that Shadowdark is continuing its popularity because I think that's really, really cool. City of Arches. So I had been working on the City of Arches, and we're going to get in a little bit. There's a bunch of like Mike Shea-isms in this, and because, I'm me, and so we're going to talk about stuff that involves me. But I've been working on City of Arches as a Patreon product for a couple of years now, and City of Arches was my main project for 2024. And boy, we spent a lot of work on it and literally released the PDF of the City of Arches last Friday. So for all of the backers, and thank you so much to all of the backers who backed the City of Arches on Kickstarter. We had a really great Kickstarter. We had 4,400 people, I think, about in the end. About 4,400 people gave their money to support this project. Those 4,400 people got a copy of the PDF of City of Arches last Friday. If you are one of those and you're like, I didn't see it, go check the Kickstarter page. You'll get information about how to go get it. You can check your backer kit support page for City of Arches. You can download it there. And if you're still having trouble, you can contact our support email and we will make sure you get your copy. But it's really cool. And I really am happy to have it out there. It is a huge load off because, like, you know, I feel really obligated to get this thing out there. And also, like, I just want people to have it. I want it to be out there in the world, and hearing people see it. And somebody on the Discord server yesterday was talking about, like, man, you packed this thing with so much material and so many locations and so much stuff. You know, I think that was really, really great. So I really like, I'm so happy that it's out there, and we're not done yet. We'll talk more about, you know, I guess I can talk about it now, but I'm not done with City of Arches yet, obviously. So the hardcover is still coming out. We're going to get that out in late spring, early summer. We're also going to have a markdown version of City of Arches that will be available to everybody who bought the PDF. We're going to have an EPUB version that's going to come down to everybody that bought the PDF. And, you know, and then I'm working on more City of Arches stuff on the Patreon. So I'm very excited about it. I love this setting. I'm running my own campaign in it, and I'm very happy. And I'm very, very happy to hear other people who have been running campaigns in the City of Arches and liking it a lot. So that matters a lot to me. This past year, there were more and more words about AI and D&D. We heard Chris Cox talk about how all of his friends used AI, and that means that we must do stuff with AI. I heard apologists who said, oh, he has to say that. He's a corporate executive, and that's the thing corporate executives have to say, which I don't buy. But, you know, lots of words about AI. Wizards of the Coast say, we do not use AI. We do not support AI. Our books are written by human beings. The art is done by human beings. We have license agreements in our publication agreements with artists that they do not send us AI stuff. And then you have the CEO saying, I love AI. So we get a lot of stuff like that. I don't think there's really any major RPG companies that are using AI for anything. So the reality is we're not truly seeing it. I did see some friends did some research on Kickstarters, which are showing that a good number, I don't remember a percentage, but a good number of the Kickstarters earning more than $100,000 were using AI art in their products. And that certainly is a immediate turnoff for a lot of the designers. Where else it could play out, if it plays out in the idea of having virtual DMs that can do things through large language models, or people using large language models to kind of generate campaign settings or even just random tables and stuff like that. I don't know where it's going to go, and nobody really knows. Nobody even knows where AI is going in the general world, much less in tabletop role-playing games. But it's certainly a big topic that comes around a lot. So it has come around a lot in the past year, and it can come around a lot. My experience is I think that you, fueled by random tables and good fiction, well outstrip the ability for AI to run things for you and your friends. And I myself prefer a good random table. After the 2024 election, there was a huge surge of people that moved over from Twitter to Bluesky. This is kind of a new thing we've seen in the general open conversation space of tabletop role-playing games, that a lot of people, in my opinion, finally moved over from X to Bluesky. I'm happy to see it. I like Bluesky. Bluesky itself is a really interesting platform, and I've spent a fair bit of time digging into it. So about 2 years ago, I left X, and back when it was still Twitter, but I knew I could tell where the winds were going, and I didn't want to be there anymore. So I left and went to Mastodon, and I really liked Mastodon. I still like Mastodon. Mastodon is a truly distributed and federated social media platform. The Mastodon server that I run off of is the one funded by Morris over at Yen World and maintained by Dave R. I talk to the people who run the server. And that's great, right? The other server is run by Sage Latora of Dungeon World, and he runs a big TTRPG Mastodon server. And people know him and trust him. I really love the idea of truly federated social media site. And Bluesky is in this really weird state where people kind of think it's federated, but it kind of isn't. There really isn't another Bluesky server somewhere that you can run. And we're seeing a lot of people that are upset about some of the moderation stuff going on Bluesky. And their argument is you need to improve your moderation. And I go, no, you're trusting a centralized platform again. Stop doing that, right? And Bluesky is still a centralized platform. It's possible, as they refer to it, the woman that runs Bluesky says that it is a billionaire-proof social media platform. I'm not sure that's the case. And from my research and digging into it and reading a lot of interviews and reading a lot of different sides of the discussion, it really comes down to that the only way that you can make another Bluesky instance is by basically making an entire fork of all of Bluesky, including all of its posts and all of its legal requirements and all of its moderation and tons of server storage to be able to run a copy that people could access. So could somebody do it? Yeah, it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars a year. And it's so expensive and so hard to do. No one that I know of has really done it yet. I think I heard rumors there was like a Japanese Bluesky instance that somebody had stood up, but you really have to have the money to do so. Mastodon's not the same way. It's much cheaper to host a different Mastodon server and federate that. That said, Bluesky is still way better than Threads. It's still better than one that actually is owned by some trillion-dollar company that decides, well, this is just another way for us to sell you crap you don't want. So I'm definitely happier with Bluesky than I would be absolutely with X, and certainly even with things like Threads or Instagram or other highly shittified social media platforms. So I'm really interested to see more TTRPG moving over to Bluesky. I've been doing a lot of work over there. I'm over there on Sly Flourish at slyflourish.com, and I have a little robot that automatically posts any of my new stuff to my feed. I wrote the TTRPG blog post robot that posts new blog updates about TTRPGs from a list of about 130 different blogs. Post that to Bluesky. I have a starter pack over there of TTRPG folks, about 146 different, you can only have 150, but I got like 146 different TTRPG folks. And then I wrote a feed. There's no algorithm in Bluesky, but you can kind of write your own algorithm with a thing called a feed. And there's a couple different sites out there that will let you build feeds, which is essentially like it's like a super advanced search, really, if you think about it. It's like basically you have a really advanced search query that says, I want to search for the following terms that don't have the following terms from the following people. And I created one that just was a little TTRPG one that said, it's like TTRPG posts from TTRPG folks. So it said, here's these 146 people that I determined are writing about TTRPG stuff or are big players in the TTRPG space. And it looks for certain keywords that they write in order to say, yeah, these are posts that are TTRPG related. It's not perfect at all, but it's like a way to filter it down to say, I only really want to see the stuff that's related to TTRPGs. So Bluesky has been very interesting. I think like my follower count there doubled in the last month or two, right? So a lot of people are moving over there. I'm also not sure if an open conversation platform is really where I want to be. That I like Discord. I've got a Discord server. It's patrons of Sly Flourish. These are people who clearly like me enough to throw a couple dollars my way every month. And we hang out there and we talk about all things in TTRPGs. I know the people there. We have good conversations. We have clear rules about what we are and are not allowed to talk about. So we try our best to make sure that like other real world conversations don't dominate the conversations about TTRPGs. We have very good moderation handling so that everybody's behaving well. We have lots of good things going on over there. And that platform I like a lot. Discord is, of course, an shittified platform like anything else. We're just waiting for the shoe to drop on how they're going to try to sell us ads or do whatever they're going to do. But right now, it's working okay. I also like going to EN World. So EN World is a website run by Russ Morrissey, who's been running it for more than 20 years. Great website. There's posts from Gary Gygax there, right? It's a huge RPG forum, and it's run by somebody who publishes in the RPG space. It's not run by a billionaire. And I love it over there. I love hanging out. I love reading the posts. I get my news there. That's where I learn about TTRPG news, is over on EN World. Really good staff that operates there. Really great writers that work over there. I love it. And it's, a really fun platform to be. I also love blogs again. I'm using NetNewsWire as my blog reader now, and I follow a lot of different TTRPG blogs. I have a website that I run called dndblogs.com, which is now switched over to TTRPGs, but I'm keeping the same domain because I've had it forever. And it has a blog roll of many, many different blogs from many different sites. And it aggregates them together into one big post. And it has its own RSS feed. So if you want to follow a single RSS feed that has all the latest TTRPG blog posts, a lot of them are kind of focused on old school stuff. Some of that is because MT Black was my original source for the blog listing that I got. And he was focused a lot on old school gaming. And the sad truth is, old school gaming is really where most of the conversation is happening. There's definitely still people talking about 5e stuff or talking about other RPGs there, so I definitely see that. But there's definitely more of an OSR feeling to the overall blog space that I'm focused on. But I really like reading it. I really love posting it, and it's a great way to see what's going on in the TTRPG world that isn't being funneled through a giant ad network. So I like that, and I plan to focus on that when I get into 2025. We're going to see. So yeah, keeping an eye on Bluesky, seeing what happens there, and looking at other non-shittified platforms for ways to communicate with and learn about this wonderful hobby of ours. So what happened with Wizards of the Coast in 2024? A couple of things. They had several layoffs. We saw people got fired in at least a few different times. We saw designers get fired. Dan Dixon DeBow, who worked over Wizards of the Coast on the community relations side, got fired. So we're seeing a lot of that. We saw a lot of executive shifts. Cynthia Williams is out. We've seen new people coming in. And we don't really know how that changes the strategy of what's going on in there. We don't know how it changes some of the big things. A lot of times they're like, oh, we have a new executive leader who's going to drive us into the future and do all this stuff. And they left. But it doesn't really matter. I always love the press releases because the press release talks about how somebody coming in is going to completely change everything for the better. And then when they leave, says they weren't really that relevant and everything is going to be fine. And you're like, which one is it? Right? Which one? But anyway, that happened. One of the things that I thought was pretty funny to kind of look back on was Bob Worldbuilder's survey. So when Wizards of the Coast put up a popularity survey, very quickly put it up and then immediately took it back down again and never said anything about it again. But it caught a lot of attention, and Bob Worldbuilder put together a survey, and we talked about it on a few different channels, and we looked at that survey results. That was something we talked about on the talk show before. And the real results, and I'm not going to go through my whole thing here, but you can go back and look at it if you want to see it. The main points were, in my opinion, a popularity survey doesn't matter because you get to feel how you're going to feel. I get to feel how I'm going to feel, and our feelings don't have to sync up. We can all decide how we feel about this. It doesn't matter if you're the only one that feels a certain way. If you feel that way, it's valid. So it doesn't really matter. The other one was the results don't matter for you and your own love of D&D RPGs and the games that you run with your players. You get to decide what you're going to do, right? If everybody else in the world hates it, but you love it, that's all that matters. You get to love it, and you and your friends get to play. And of course, the results from the poll that Bob Worldbuilder did wasn't representative of everyone. We don't know who everyone is. Neither would have been representative for Wizards of the Coast when they put it out, because they put it out only on certain platforms and only the certain people. You have selection bias and all sorts of everything. So it wasn't a general view of the hobby overall. It was only a view of the survey participants. And we could even see the bias in the data when we looked at when I posted about it, when Professor Dungeon Master posted about it, and when Bob Worldbuilder posted about it. We had different sets of results. Things shifted depending on who had spoken about it at any given time. But the real results are, from those that were surveyed, respondents thought positively about D&D and negatively about Wizards. I'm not sure that's a big surprise. I think people love D&D and not necessarily love Wizards. I think that was one. To me, if it was, Wizards has a very big image problem, right? If they love the brand but they don't love the company, why? Yeah, how do you fix that? And I don't think that Wizards did themselves many favors this past year. I think they did some things both purposefully and accidentally that caused them some of these image problems. And they had big ones the year before that they had to work with. But people still love D&D. And this was an interesting, at the time, most respondents weren't positive. They weren't positive about the future direction of D&D. They didn't necessarily think it was going into the right place. Now that we actually have D&D 2024 in hand, it'll be interesting to see, in a year, how do we feel about it? That's something that we're going to see. And respondents were accurate about their other feelings. So this was sort of a calibration question that I thought was really interesting, which is, how did you feel other people are going to feel about it? And the answer was, people felt accurately about it. They thought, I thought that people would, this is one where I thought we were wrong. I thought more people would think that people thought good of D&D than they did, and they wouldn't calibrate correctly, but they did calibrate correctly. So that was pretty interesting. I had all kinds of interesting data on that. I don't know if that's still true. Now the future of D&D, I bet you people still don't think good about the future of D&D, but I don't think it matters nearly as much, because now the books, once the core books are out, the core books are out. And the only other product I think really matters that could actually affect the game in big ways is the starter set. I don't think the 3D VTT matters. I don't think necessarily a lot of what they do with D&D Beyond matters. I don't think there's much that can move the needle on D&D that Wizards can do over the next year. I think they could put out good products. I think they could put out crappy products. And I think, and I know this because they've done so. If we look at their product listings over the past 10 years, how many products can you point at and say, wow, that really moved the needle on D&D popularity overall, or TTRPG popularity? Outside of the core books, what product really drove new people in or pushed people out? I don't think it mattered, right? I think sometimes they're good books and sometimes they're not. I'm not saying that that's bad. I don't think we want it to matter that much. When they put out a good book, I want it to be a good book, and we use it and we like it. And if they put out a bad book, we go, it's not for me. I'm not going to buy it. I think if we look at, we'll look at adventures, right? And I really loved Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I thought it was an excellent adventure. I ran it. I loved it. My players loved it. It really captured that whimsical feel of a high fantasy fairy-ish sort of RPG. Really loved it. So then they put out another one like Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk, Phandelver and Below, which really didn't do anything. And all the reviews I read, I didn't even run it. And I didn't really look at it that much. But the reviews I read said like, man, they somehow managed to take the starter set and made it worse. Right? And they could have just left the starter set alone and it would have been fine, but they kind of just made a big mess of it. And I've heard lots of like intricacies. Did that change the game? Did it hurt it? Did it make the hobby worse? Did it mean that like Free League sold less copies of the One Ring because of that? I don't think so. It actually takes a lot for Wizards to move the needle. And really the only thing, in my opinion, that they can do, it feels like that they can do to move the needle is putting out new core books and putting out a starter set. And that's because the main role that I think Wizards holds in this hobby is bringing new people in. Once they're in, they get to see all of this other stuff. And they get to build their own games. And they get to homebrew their own games. And they probably write their own games because almost everybody's got their own version of a game that they wrote. All that stuff is there. So yeah, I don't think that there's much. I think once the monster manual comes out, I don't think there's much. But we're going to talk about that when we dive into looking forward to 2025. So, what happened in 2025? Or what happened? We'll come back. We'll come back in a year and find out. What am I looking forward to? Right? What am I keeping an eye on? Obviously, the big one for me is the 2025 D&D Monster Manual. I want to see what that's like. I'm apprehensive, but maybe it's just me and I'm cynical. Maybe I'll open up and it'd be great. One of the things I'm apprehensive about is I saw some of the stat blocks that were released in recent adventures where they had a little disclaimer saying this isn't going to be the final stat block that is going to be released. And at first I was like, oh, good, because I really don't like these stat blocks at all, right? Especially the mage stat block. I looked at the mage stat block and I was like, it's all back to putting spells in the, all of its main power is stuck in the spell listing again. I thought we got away from that. I thought the whole point was to break away from that. Now I'm beginning to worry that those were the ones, or they were close enough. And that, I don't know, I don't have anything to back that up. I haven't seen it yet. But enough people are talking about like, they're doing reviews of it. Paul Hughes is doing reviews of it. And I'm like, are those the ones? Well, I'll find out. I am signed up to get a review copy of the Monster Manual in January. And there's an embargo date somewhere in there. And at that point, I'll be able to talk more about what I see in the D&D Monster Manual. And again, it's going to be a big, complex book with, they say it's got 600 monsters or some ridiculous number of monsters in there. So we're not going to know right away the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. But I'm very eager to see it. Probably even bigger than that for me, that I really want to see, that they better do, or you're going to hear about it every week on this show, is the release of the 5.2 SRD. They said they would do it. They've reiterated that they're going to do it. For months, they've talked about how they're going to release the 5.2 SRD. The 5.2 SRD basically says that they're going to take the core rules from the 2024 version of D&D, the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Monster Manual, and release those under a Creative Commons license the same way they did with the 2014 version. They said they were going to do that in early 2025 once the Monster Manual is out. I expect them to do so. I think they will. And I think they will because they've now actually wrote posts on D&D Beyond about how they are holding back on other things that they would want to do because they know that SRD is going to be coming out. So it feels like they're going to. I just hope, knowing the shifts that happen inside the company, I'm just hoping whoever is spearheading that is still able to spearhead that and that they're still able to drive it hard and get it done, because it's so easy for things to get shifted around. And until we have it, once we have it in our hands, we're all set. If we don't have it in our hands, we're not all set. So I am eager to see that. I'm also eager to see the 13th Age version 2. Rob Hainslow and Jonathan Tweet put out 13th Age, one of my favorite role-playing games. I really love it. I've actually been kind of avoiding looking at 13th Age version 2's playtest rules because I kind of want to see it when it's done. And I certainly want to have a physical book in my hand. I know they're working on it. I know it looks really good. And I'm eager to see 13th Age. So I'm very excited for that. Dolmenwood. Dolmenwood is an old school role-playing game developed by the same people that did Old School Essentials. I have the PDFs, and the PDFs are great. I have friends over on the Sly Flourish Discord server that have been running Dolmenwood games and love it. They really, really love it. I've looked over the PDFs and I really like it. I really want to see the books in hand. I think these physical books are going to be amazing. And I'm really looking forward to having Dolmenwood in a physical copy. I think it's going to be very, very cool. Shadowdark is going to have a new Kickstarter for Cursed Scrolls. I talked about that on the talk show this week. They just announced it, but I'm going to be looking forward to that. Draw Steel, the tactical fantasy role-playing game by MCDM with the lead designer of James Intercasso, my good friend James Intercasso. That is due to come out. They just put out a new playtest version of it, I think, for their patrons. Or I don't even know if it's a playtest. They said it's basically the whole book, but that looks like it's going to come forth. I've got multiple friends that are working on this game, and I think it's really going to scratch the itch. I'm hoping, and I expect, it's really going to scratch the itch for a lot of people who loved 4th edition D&D and want that sort of tactical fantasy play. I think it's going to have a good angle on that style of play. So I'm looking forward to that. 2 other ones that I have not been paying any attention to, but I think are probably going to come out in 2025 that could have, I was having some conversation with friends of mine about, kind of how big a deal. I think they could be a big gravity well for a lot of conversations. I don't think they're going to steer like the entire hobby one way or the other, but I think they could get a lot of attention within the hobby. And that's Daggerheart, the Critical Role role-playing game, and Cosmere, the Brandon Sanderson role-playing game that had some enormous Kickstarter, huge Kickstarter for Cosmere. Are they going to make a dent in like the total sales of RPGs? I mean, maybe, but then they're not going to be D&D. They're not going to eclipse D&D, right? We never have to, I would never bet against D&D being the number one RPG because it has been for 50 years. You're very likely to be. But I think when it comes to like those inside the RPG space, it'll be interesting to see how many people are drawn towards this. Part of the conversations were like, are we going to see more people talking about Shadowdark or Daggerheart, right? And really different communities and different groups. It'll be interesting to see like how that comes out. And then what happens with the Cosmere RPG, I think could be very interesting. So those are all kinds of things that I'm keeping my eye out on and I'm looking forward to in 2025. I'm eager. I think 2024 has been an outstanding year for tabletop role-playing games. I love it. I've been having great fun with my friends. I'm enjoying sharing tips and tricks and sources and everything with you guys. I really love it. One thing I thought would be fun, I wrote 52 Sly Flourish articles and newsletters this past year. And I went through all of those 52 newsletters to kind of pick out what I thought were my top 10 newsletters. I'm going to link to all of these in the show notes here so you can enjoy them. What were the articles that I wrote that I thought were kind of most valuable or had a really good point that I think could last a long time or were truly helpful to people in the RPG space. One of them was Advanced Random Encounter Tricks, which I published back in November. And this is just a quick list of the different ways that you can use existing random encounter tables to make even richer encounters. Things like rolling twice on the same table or mixing multiple tables together, rolling to see what happened before, adding monuments, creating your own faction roles, attitudes, distance, activities, and the Oracle die. That's all described in that article. I thought it was a really useful one. The many right answers of the TTRPG hobby. This comes to the idea that there are many right ways to enjoy this hobby. There are many games we can love that not everyone else loves, but sometimes it's hard for us to understand why anyone would love the thing that we don't love or why they don't love the thing that we do love. And holding these two truths together can make us communicate better when it comes to our various discourse and tabletop role-playing games, in particular using a special phrase, it's not for me. Cosmere RPG might not be for me. Draw Steel, I'm super excited to see it, but it might not be for me. Traveler, everyone loves Traveler, it's not for me. Right? Pathfinder 2. Lots of people love Pathfinder 2. I actually just picked up the Pathfinder 2 Monster Core yesterday because I want to dive in and look at it and see it and compare it and stuff like that. But I know Pathfinder 2 is not for me. It's not the kind of game I dig. Other people love it, and I hold nothing back. My opinion of a game does not matter to you at all. You get to love the games that you love. I get to love the games that I love. We get to have reasons, and we can have good discourse about why, and we can learn from each other. We shouldn't try to convince someone that the game they love, they shouldn't love, right? That's probably the biggest important one. Now, maybe we can help expose people to games they don't love and maybe they get to love them. But they might come a point where they can explain to you why they don't love them. For example, I might say, I love Cypher System because the DM never rolls. And I have a friend who says, I can't imagine wanting to run an RPG when you never roll dice. And I'm like, okay, probably not for you, right? That was an important article. Using Obsidian, I've been talking a lot about Obsidian in the talk show this week. I talked a ton about using Obsidian, Web Clipper for Obsidian, and using RPG Markdown files in your Obsidian notebook, but also how to use Obsidian for campaign planning. I wrote my first article on this. It's a thing I'm going to continue to explore. Using Obsidian for lazy RPG prep is something I wrote about. The 10 types of stonework decorations. This was a very popular section on my talk show that I did, and it was an article, and it was a popular type of article. This is really the kind of article I think people really want me to write about, where they're like, just give me 10 different decorations that you might find. Reliefs and friezes, murals, frescoes, mosaics, runic carvings, encaustic paintings, gilded engravings, marrowflage, and sgraffito. Different kinds of carvings that you might find on a wall. Good list to have in your notes so that you can describe them when people are exploring stuff. Running i6 Ravenloft with Shadowdark. So every year I've run Ravenloft for my Halloween game, and now 2 years in a row I've used Shadowdark for this. So I wrote an article specifically about how to use Shadowdark to run Ravenloft, which I think is the perfect chocolate and peanut butter mixed together. Real fun. I think Shadowdark is a great system for Ravenloft. I think Ravenloft is a really fun, it's my favorite adventure of all time, and you mix these two things together and it works really well. I talked about how to do it here. What else? How to survive a digital D&D future. This is the kind of article some people really wish I didn't write about, but I think is really important. And this one is really getting down to like Wizards of the Coast is just super excited to hurl D&D towards a digital future. They really want that. Do we really want it or not? And do we have to worry about it? This article talks about it, and there are 4 reasons why you don't really have to worry about it. 1, you're going to have the core book. You have the core books in hand, but the D&D 2024 core books are all going to be physical books. You'll be able to put them on your shelf, and as long as you take care of them, you'll be able to own them forever. And it doesn't matter what anybody does anywhere else. You get to always own those books. The rule sets will be released or are released under a Creative Commons license, which means that other people can develop for them. You can develop for them. You can copy those rules and send them to your friends and everything like that for the rest of your life. We have 50 years of previous versions of D&D we can play. And many people I have 2 different friends with 2 different groups running 2nd edition D&D. 2 different ones running 2nd edition D&D. So we have old versions of D&D that people love. We also have tons of other publishers who are making tons of different RPGs that we can love and enjoy. I was talking to a friend of mine who said he ran like 14 different RPGs in like a month. I forget what it was, but he's run a ton of different RPGs. And we have many different digital platforms, some of which we can download and use offline to be able to run the games that we run. So it doesn't really matter how much the executives at Hasbro want to hurl D&D into a digital future, because we have a fail-safe. And the fail-safe is physical books, other digital downloadable tools, open licenses, and lots of other publishers making lots of other games. So I think that is really fantastic. But I wanted to write about that in an article. I think it's a very apt article given all the things that are going on. Using the 8 steps at the table. A common question I had about the 8 steps of Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master is, how do they actually manifest when you're at the table? This article talks specifically about why, not just how they manifest, but why we do it the way we do it. This idea of prepping the stuff to help you improvise the game. You're not building scenes that are going to run a certain way. You have all of the components in front of you that you need to let scenes occur as the game runs on. This article, I think, covers that topic better than I've been able to. And if you're into the 8 steps, if you like Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, that is a very useful game. What is 5e? This is an argument I've had now for a year. I think, about a year. That the definition of 5e, in my opinion, has changed. 5e used to mean the 5th edition of the 2014 version of Dungeons & Dragons. 2014 D&D was 5e. Wizards of the Coast themselves have muddied the waters by claiming that D&D 2024 also is 5e. And they didn't call it 5.5, they didn't call it 6e, they didn't give it any other name other than referring to it as the 2024 books for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So right there, they don't even have a definition for 5e. But then you also have things like Black Flag and Tales of the Valiant from Kobold Press, which is a completely open game system that's based on 5e that operates and is fully compatible with D&D 2014 and 2024. It's also 5e. Level Up Advanced 5e has 5e in the title. It is their take on 5e, completely independent, and has their own system reference document, completely independent from that developed by Wizards of the Coast. And that's also 5e, which means 5e, in my opinion, now doesn't mean Dungeons and Dragons anymore. 5e now means 5e is an open gaming platform that anybody can write for, that multiple core systems are written for, that are loosely compatible with one another. And that's fantastic. It's fantastic, right? I love this. Part of the reason I hammer on this point is because I don't just think it's true. I think it's really important that it is true. So I have a whole article that explains why, so that whenever I argue with people about it, I can send them this article and say, this is my explanation. And some people don't buy it, and that's fine. They don't have to buy it, right? They can call it whatever they want. I see so many different people call D&D 2024 so many different things. I've had arguments with good friends of mine who are just like, nobody's going to understand what you're saying. And I'm like, fine, but I'm still saying it because I still believe it. So that is an article about what is 5e today and why is it different than what it was before. Running Dungeon Crawls wrote a series of articles to try to break down what it's like to run these different common types of situations in our fantasy role-playing games. And I wanted to break them down by understanding what they are, how you prepare for them, how you run them, what pitfalls you might run into, and how you offset those pitfalls. And I base this on a book written by Robin Laws called Adventure Crucible, Building Stronger Scenarios for Any RPG. And I really like that idea, and I wanted to continue to grab onto that idea and break it forth into these different styles of games that are done. So it's a series of, I think, 9 articles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It is a series of 9 articles that cover these common adventure types and break them down into those categories so that you can get an understanding of what makes running investigations and mysteries hard. What are some of the common pitfalls you might run into, and how do you offset those pitfalls? All of them are together. I even put them together into a small chapbook that you can order print on demand from Amazon, and as a PDF and EPUB that's available to patrons of Sly Flourish. So the whole series of articles is sort of a mini book that I released earlier this year, but that was a really fun adventure series to write. Replacing 5e's inspiration with luck. So I picked this one because it's something that I did, and now I do in every game, and we've been running it this way now for years, and for at least since I've heard about luck. The Tales of the Valiant's luck system, I think, works so much better than traditional inspiration does for other versions of 5e. And I've replaced it in my A5e games, my 2014 games. I don't really have a solid 2024 game, but also Tales of Valiant obviously uses it as the default. The luck system is fantastic. I really, really like it. It's easy to drop into a game, and it works really, really well. So the article about how to replace the inspiration system in your game with luck was something that I think is great. So those, I feel, are the big things that happened in 2024. Fantastic year. Really looking forward to 2025. And hopefully you found this the top 10 Sly Flourish articles. Hopefully you found that useful. If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. There is a link in the show notes. It's absolutely free to sign up. You get a free PDF adventure generator and miniature version of 5e that you can run for your friends tonight. You also get a weekly RPG related article sent to your inbox every Tuesday. You can also become a patron of Sly Flourish. You get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, tools, scenarios, a whole other podcast, a whole bunch of different things that you get for being a patron of Sly Flourish. Very reasonably priced and helps me put on shows like this. And you can pick up any of my books, including Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, the Workbook, the Companion, Forge of Foes. The City of Arches PDF is now available on the Sly Flourish bookstore. You can find all of that. All of the links for all of that are in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Get out there and play an RPG.